Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, right here on talkTV. Peter Hitchens is here from the Mail on Sunday. What do you make of these calls, by the way, for the modernisation of Parliament? Because inevitably the tractor story has turned into, it's a den of iniquity. People stand around getting drunk all day and then go and vote on very important matters. I mean, Parliament is a very unusual place. You've spent plenty of time there.
I worked there for some years in the 1980s. There is too much drinking there. There's no question of that, and I wouldn't regret it at all if that would cut down. But what people have to remember is members of Parliament are not employees. They're employees of the government. If they're employed by anybody, it's by the people who've elected them, to whom they're responsible. And their jobs have become far too much as jobs of obedient party hacks, asking planted questions at Prime Minister's Question Time, doing exactly what they're told, never rebelling on anything significant, never giving anybody any trouble. And I think the tendency towards having a sort of ideal member of Parliament, it seems to me, would be a radical left-wing woman for preference, is a mistake. You have to have, apart from anything else, in a British Parliament, you have to have some noise and raucousness, because it's supposed to be a safety valve for a quite strongly divided nation, divided by class, divided by region, divided by age, divided by all kinds of things. It should reflect that.
Yes.
If it doesn't reflect that, it just becomes a quiet, well-behaved committee of wholly blameless people. Then it will lose its point. And when the safety valve is blocked, the boiler explodes.
I think it might be close to losing its point. I mean, I was laughing the other day when somebody suggested that this guy Parish had somehow brought Parliament into disrepute, and I thought, really?
He brought himself into disrepute.
Well, no, but also, what reputation now does Parliament have? I mean, there are people sitting in there still who have been found guilty of criminal acts. There are people who have been sent to prison who were working there. There are people who are still in position, having been found to have been up to all sorts of nastiness.
Well, that doesn't trouble me all that much, because, as I say, it ought to be as representative as possible of the people as a whole, and therefore there will be people in it who I will not like, and who will do things which are wrong.
Yeah, but hopefully not representative of people who have some rather odd habits.
No, but representative of people with failings, I think we might reasonably say. But I just think it's become colourless and bland. And I think, for instance, that 30 years ago you had, for instance, an MP like Tam Diel, who it didn't really matter what party was in power. He was always prepared to make trouble for the government on the basis of hard forensic factual investigation of what they were up to.
Yes.
There were tedious but nonetheless dedicated left-wing MPs with the sort of frank...
Even the old beast of Bolsover was good for them.
But the thing was that nobody could guarantee a smooth, untroubled hearing for anything. And the whole point about Parliament is the one law it passes every week is the law of unintended consequences. With weak opposition and an absence of troublemakers and difficult people, then it will constantly do that. And if you try and weed out people who are in any way difficult, awkward, even misbehaved, noisy, raucous, whatever it may be, and if you try to make it a bland chamber, then you will get a chamber which isn't much use to the country.
Yes, I think that's right. And I wonder as well whether we wouldn't have had the problems that we did have for the last 2 years if everybody wasn't so kind of easily swayed in Parliament, because all the things that you predicted have come true in the sense of the state of the economy, payback for all the furlough money, the way that people were changed forever.
And the disaster of the health service.
Yeah.
It's the appalling, entirely predictable disaster of the health service, which was achieved under the banner of saving it. It's extraordinary things, but very little opposition, very few people of a troublemaking nature. And I have a feeling that it's just possible that if you want to have a troublemaking parliament, then you have to have a parliament with some with a higher proportion of bad apples in it. I think they probably go together. They won't be the same people necessarily, but there's too much selection of MPs by party machines on the basis that they've got absolutely no problems with them at all. They're just bland, obedient, basically serfs.
I mean, I know it's sort of pie in the sky to talk about it, but would we be better off without a party system? Would you not just elect kind of individuals who could then form groups?
No, what you need, though, is different parties, and the two parties that we have are both dead. If you held a flag day for either of them on the streets, no one would give any money. They're kept alive by the donations of dodgy billionaires and by a huge amount of state aid, and also by broadcasting rules which give the existing parties far too much coverage and far too much leeway. There's no real room for newcomers at a general election. That needs to change. If you could get rid of these two parties, I always said if you could have a Peter Hitchens party and a Polly Toynbee party instead of what we have, that would much better reflect the disagreements in the country, result in much better governments of both left and right, and produce a much more intelligent parliament. But we don't have that. We have these parties which are based on divisions which in most cases ceased to exist.
That's right.
40 years ago.
I mean, and I get many people now saying I don't like either one of them. I wish there was an alternative that could be successful.
But it's very difficult to crack through. And people say, oh, let's have proproportional representation, but you'd wave goodbye.
That's not any good either.
No, one of the great things about my life, I remember Ted Heath in 1974 having to hoik his piano out into the street overnight because he just lost an election.
Right.
This doesn't happen in most countries.
No.
People are not thrown out of power. And this is a great thing that we have with the two-party system, which I think we should keep. If you have proportional representation, the government is always basically the same people.
Yeah, it's just a sort of merry-go-round. Let's talk about Julian Assange. We've got a couple more minutes to go. You wrote about him again this weekend.
Yeah, I just feel I wish more people would join us, because it doesn't matter what you think of Julian Assange, even to some extent of what he did. The way in which he's being treated simply is not fitting for a civilised free country. He shouldn't be in the conditions he's being held in. There's no reason why he's in a maximum security prison. Okay, so he's a flight risk, but he's not going to climb out of Belmarsh.
Well, you wouldn't have thought so.
It begins to look like something else. And the other thing is that it's a real challenge to national sovereignty. The Americans have decided they want to prosecute him on basically political grounds. And I don't think a sovereign country can allow another power to reach into its territory and pluck somebody out because it doesn't like him, because basically he embarrassed them. That's basically his crime in American eyes. And I do think that Priti Patel, a lot of people are very rude about Priti Patel, but she could, I think, if she were to respond to the letters which I urge people constantly to write to her, polite and brief, urging her to refuse the extradition, she was to do that, she'd transform her reputation, I think. And remember, Theresa May refused to extradite Gary McKinnon in parallel, remarkably similar circumstances. And ultimately, it didn't do us, the country, any harm, and it was very good for Gary McKinnon.
And it didn't harm any relationship between the US and the UK either.
A bit, I think. There was some huffing and
some bruised
puffing,
egos.
But I don't think any serious damage was done, because in the end, actually, as General de Gaulle proved in his relations with the Americans, if you stand up to the United States, they treat you better than if you don't.
Yeah, they find somebody else to bully, basically, and they can go elsewhere for that. But you're absolutely right. It does, I think, for most people who, once you tell them why you feel the way you do about Julian Assange, because he's being held literally having not been convicted of any crime, just because
shocking,
he might go somewhere, it's ludicrous.
It's shocking that he should have been in prison so long without being convicted of anything. You think this is what you were brought up to believe never happened here.
Yes.
And yet it has.
Similarly, as I said the other day, to put Boris Becker in Wandsworth Jail, one of the worst, most Victorian horror jails of the nation, is just mad.
Well, our whole prison system, people are surprised when the whole prison system is a disgrace anyway, and something enormously radical needs to be done about it, but that's a question for another longer day.
Yes, indeed. Well, listen, it's great to see you. We're out of time, sadly. We're almost out of time. So hopefully we'll be able to see you here every week.
Let's hope so.
If we can manage to get the trains running and the transportation system's working. And
my bicycle is working. That's the key. That's key.
Well, that's the main thing. Did you find somewhere to park it?
Well, I don't know whether it'll still be there when I get back, of course, but then you never do.
That's always a worry. I came out of here, I did a show on Saturday night, and for the first time I was walking outside here at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night. It was like something out of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Good heavens.
There's anything like it.
It certainly isn't like it's much more like the aftermath of
I'm obviously
28 days after today. It's a bank holiday.
I'm obviously getting old. Peter Hitchens, great to see you. We've got more to come. We will take more of your calls, of course. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We've got more guests to talk to. Let me read you a couple of these. These days I avoid train travel at weekends and bank holidays, the only exception being the Thought Police show in Putney on the 7th of May. My goodness me, that's ours. And here's one from Sir Mac, who says, why can't the government sack civil service workers who refuse to return to work and demand that the civil service leaders resign if they refuse to implement government policy? Well, that's a very good point, actually. Peter, I'm going to keep you here for this, because the civil service and the politicisation of the civil service seems to be a relatively new thing, is it?
Well, it is. I mean, it started under Margaret Thatcher to a certain extent, but it was hugely extended by the Blair government, which I think it isn't today the 25th anniversary of that terrible...
Actually, yes, it is.
That terrible
I meant to ask
day.
you about that.
And the thing that they did, which was noted but not fully understood, was that the orders in council were passed, basically bypassing the Constitution, saying that two people, including Alistair Campbell, our old friend, were to be given the powers to order civil servants about, even though they had no elected office. The other one was Jonathan Powell.
Yes.
And this was a
Who
huge...
prefers his name pronounced Pole, I think, isn't it? I don't know
Oh,
why.
no, that's the other one. There's a long story about the Poles, but and the Powells. But but the point about them is this:
Poles apart.
As we know, the Blair creature isn't really on top of things very much. I mean, I remember a conversation in which he didn't know that they spoke Portuguese in Brazil. He thought they spoke Brazilian.
Really?
He really isn't very clued up. And the idea that he was a sort of executive prime minister has always made me laugh. So if they had to have somebody, and it was Alistair, and they had to give him. But on the other hand, the electorate would never, confronted with Alistair in any constituency, or let alone as the leader of the party, would ever have allowed him anywhere near the levers of office. So he couldn't get in that way.
Yeah.
So they got these orders in council through, and that was the beginning of it. And one of the things which Alistair did was he got an iron grip on the civil service, which the government has never let go of. So it is more.
And did they then sort of politicise it at that moment, put their people in, as it were?
Well, I think they made it. They made it as a servant of government. Then the other thing, of course, which they did was they made the Conservative Party their servant by browbeating it repeatedly in those the William Hague elections and the Michael Howard election, until the Conservative Party more or less adopted a new Labour position. So you have a double revolution. You have the end of any diversity of major political parties, and you have the end of civil service neutrality. It helps to produce what we have. But the disaster of working from home, of course, is that it took perhaps 200 years of industrial revolution to get people used to the idea of going into work every day. And it was dealt the most tremendous blow by the COVID panic. And once people have found that life is perfectly pleasant without doing it, it's extraordinarily difficult to get them to go back.
Yes.
I mean, our current position of laws and human rights and everything else are very, very hard for the government to actually find the power to do this. So it doesn't happen.
No.
It may never happen. People, in some cases, may never go back to regular daily life.
There's been one glint of light this morning. There's a law firm in the city who apparently said to people, "You're very welcome to work from home. We'll give you a 20% pay cut." And I wonder whether that might just spur some more people to come back in.
Let's see how that plays in the courts before we, everything else. I mean, the courts these days are not necessarily inclined to support actions of that kind, and that's why people are reluctant to do them. And you look at the real other revolution which has taken place has been in the judiciary and the courts, which are very radical now.
They really are.
And you cannot rely on them to enforce what you would have thought 30 or 40 years ago was
They're quite keen
law.
on letting climate activists off the hook every
Well,
single
there's that
Sunday.
too, but it is a very big change, and it's one of the reasons why governments and employers hesitate to do things which, again, once they would unhesitatingly have done. We've had a revolution in this country.
Yeah.
And one of the major moments of it was 25 years ago today, when that ridiculous fake demonstration was happening.
Well, I was going to say, if you ever want to know why it was all a bit of a con job, looking up Downing Street that morning, I remember going, "Oh, isn't it great? Everybody wants to see this young man with his young family in Downing Street."
Yeah.
Then it turned out they were all members of the Labour Party.
Well, of course they were, because nobody else can get it for years. Downing Street had been closed. I remember when you could walk through it.
It was all showbiz, wasn't it?
It was, but the thing is, it is still shown, that clip of Blair going into Downing Street with the cheering crowd waving. It's still shown as if it's a genuine event, when in fact it's a completely North Korean thing.
It really is.
But I only once, when I presented a programme for BBC4, oddly enough, did I ever get it on air that this is a fake demonstration.
Yeah.
But I see it over and over again.
Well, now we've done it again. We're going to play it later and show you just how fake it was. Peter, this is definitely goodbye this time.
This is definitely goodbye.
This is definitely goodbye. The long goodbye. Peter Hitchens, Mail on Sunday. Thank you very much indeed. We'll see you next week.